Hey everybody, it's your old pal Mike. I hope you're happy, healthy, and safe, and welcome back to the channel for another Jaguar review, this time featuring the fantastic and the noteworthy Johnny Marr signature Jaguar. After years and years of working on these, I finally have one of my own, and I've been able to spend a lot of quality time with it. And boy do I have thoughts, almost all of them good. The changes that Mr. Marr made to this guitar make it a bit of a standout among the other offerings of the Fender catalog. It's vibey, it's versatile, it's very good. Yeah, that's what I'm going with, it's very good. The Johnny Marr model is a really unique take on the Jaguar platform, and one where a lot of little changes add up to something really special. Before we get too far into it, let's talk specs. The Johnny Marr Jaguar features a 24-inch scale-length maple neck with an aged gloss nitro finish and a profile based on Marr's own 1965 Jaguar. It has 22 vintage-style frets on a white dot inlaid 7¼ inch radius rosewood fretboard and a synthetic bone nut. The headstock wears proudly the Johnny Marr signature decal as well as 6 Clouson-style tuners. The underbody wears a gloss nitro finish. This example comes in Olympic white with a white plastic pickguard and cream pickup covers. The neck pocket is angled from the factory and provides 1.15 degrees of neck inclination, which eliminates the use of shims and takes the guesswork out of setup. The pickups are custom-wound bare-knuckle Johnny Marr pickups, measuring at 6.73K ohms in the bridge and 5.476K in the neck. The body wears the usual Jaguar lead circuit control plate with a master volume and tone on the lower bout, but the other plates are atypical for a Jaguar. Where you'd find the bank of 3 switches on a normal Jaguar, the Johnny Marr model instead features a 4-way switch for pickup selection. The typical Jaguar rhythm circuit is here replaced by a plate with 2 switches, one for universal bright and another bright switch for the in-series selection only. For hardware, the Marguar has a few unique touches. First, the bridge is a 7¼ inch radius Mustang-style bridge with 6 individual saddles and nylon inserts on each bridge post, which keeps the embedded height adjustment screws firmly in place. Secondly, the vibrato arm and collet are unique to the Marr model, with a redesigned collet that uses a nylon insert to eliminate excessive play in the arm. Otherwise, the vibrato is the typical American vintage part. The guitar comes from the factory with 10 to 46 strings, but here I've set it up with my favorite set of Ernie Ball 12 to 54. It is tuned to E standard. Has this ever happened to you?
This fretboard is very rough.
Or how about this?
Can you hear this?
Or this?
Some of the frets are not perfectly seated.
We've got just the solution for you. Introducing Patreon. Because you shouldn't have to do fretwork on a brand new guitar. I don't know, I can't help it. These are things that I noticed, and I am telling you about them. The Johnny Marr Jaguar was first introduced in 2012 in two colors. One, Olympic white, which is what I have here, and metallic candy orange, which is what the KO stands for. Previously, I thought it meant knockout, but denizens of the internet were so kind to correct me, so thank you. Thank you very much for that. These two colors persist even today, but there have been limited edition runs in other colors like black, Sherwood green, Lake Placid blue, and most recently Fever Dream yellow. Now, the Johnny Marr was immediately met with a lot of high praise, and rightly so. It's a fantastic and somewhat streamlined version of the Jaguar that makes a lot of good sense to a lot of players. However, that's not to say that there weren't some issues early on, namely the bridge. The earliest examples of the Johnny Marr Jaguar featured a bridge with too wide string spacing that put the high E's right on the edges of the fretboard. In some cases, I found them entirely unplayable, and any decent amount of finger pressure would put those strings right off the edge of the fretboard. Fender eventually did a mid-run refresh of this model, updating the bridge with 53mm string spacing instead of the previous standard 55, which brought the E strings in a little bit and made playability a lot nicer. Now, another issue that these guitars had early on was one of the finish just flaking right off. Just like the previous AVRI 62 models, the Johnny Marr model is finished in nitrocellulose lacquer, but it's on top of a rather thick poly sealer. And for some reason or another, the nitro just didn't want to stick. This is something that I haven't heard about in recent years, so it feels like to me that Fender might have fixed that. But obviously, this is a brand new guitar. I haven't actually beaten it up at all, so I really can't comment on that. Now, there is a lot to talk about with the Johnny Marr model, but I will leave off the history lesson. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about the history of this model, paulreno.com has a great page dedicated to the ins and outs of the Johnny Marr signature Jaguar, so I encourage you to check that out. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this is the first signature model that I've reviewed on this channel. There are other Fender signature models, the Jim Root, the Troy Van Leeuwen, the Kurt Cobain, they all come to mind. And there are a few really interesting Fender Japan models too that are signature guitars, but this is the first Jaguar that I've reviewed that was built to the specifications of a specific player, and that's really interesting to me. Out of the gate, let's talk about how this guitar looks, and I think it looks quite smart. But there is sort of a thing with the Johnny Marr Jaguar. It might be the modified control plates, it might be the few colors it comes in, it might be the very yellow pickup covers, or even the very orange tint of the neck. But you always know that you're looking at a Johnny Marr, which is not a bad thing. That's just how the model presents. One thing I do really like about this guitar is that the contours are extraordinarily rounded when compared with other reissue Fenders and even vintage examples. You've got sort of a ballooning that happens on the edge of the body that is, I think, really attractive. Now, I did mention the orange tint of the neck earlier, and that is very true. I mean, that's very orange, right? That's very, very orange. I have indeed seen worse, so yeah, this is by far not the orangest that I've seen from Fender. Otherwise, the neck is really comfortable, and it almost feels like it has an asymmetrical profile. It does feel a little bit more full than it does on the treble side. It makes it really easy to reach around with my fingers. But I would say that I actually like it. It's a little bit bigger than I normally would go for, but it fills the hand really nicely. Again, the profile is comfortable. So yeah, I have really grown to enjoy this neck, and it is just a hair wider than 1 5/8, which is my favorite Jaguar nut width. But you know what? It doesn't mess me up at all. So I approve this neck. Moving on from the neck, I think it's time to talk about hardware. Now, there are a couple notable changes with the hardware. You know, we already talked about the bridge earlier in the history portion of this video. It's kind of your standard Mustang style bridge with a 7 1/4 inch radius, but the bridge actually has nylon inserts on the posts which firmly hold the height adjustment screws, preventing them from unscrewing or shimmying downward as you play the guitar, which is a genius move and something that I believe was adapted from John at Stay-Trem, who had a hand in designing this hardware, so hats off. But that's not all. The vibrato also features a change to the collet and arm design that I think is super beneficial here. This arm is held in place by a nylon insert, but this nylon insert more firmly grasps the arm, holding it in. You don't have to worry about it falling out while you're playing. And in general, my experience has found that this arm is held in place a little bit more firmly, but this one is rather loose, I will say. Now let's touch on the controls, which are themselves very different from what you'd find on a standard Jaguar. Of course, we still have volume and tone on this bottom plate here where the jack is located, but where you would normally find a bank of 3 switches dictating on-off for each pickup, as well as the strangle switch, which cuts bass. Instead of that, we've got a 4-way blade switch. We've got selections for bridge pickup only, both in parallel, your normal Jaguar middle position, the neck, and an additional 4th position, which is both pickups in series, which is such a powerful thing to have on a Jaguar. In addition to that, the upper control plate has been modified so that it no longer is a rhythm circuit, which is the dark set of controls found on standard Jaguars. Instead, we've got 2 switches. One is meant to govern the normal 3 positions on this switch, your bridge, your middle, your neck, and this one only works on the series position, and I think that that's why the series sound is so darn good on this guitar. Now, series operation, if you're not aware, is different from your usual middle position where you're just summing the output of 2 pickups. In series, you're actually running one pickup's output directly into the next, giving you a much thicker, louder sound overall. However, I gotta say that series is not something that I always find useful. Often I find that it turns whatever guitar I'm playing into pure mud. So when I finally got my Marr and I flipped to the 4th position, I said, yeah, I'm just not gonna use that. But the minute that I engaged the series-only strangle switch, that's when I got it. It removes just enough of those mud frequencies where I find it to be a glorious tone, and I just leave the strangle on all the time in the 4th position. I really think that Marr, that Fender, that Bare Knuckle really got this right here. Now, speaking of the bare knuckle pickups, they are fantastic. When I read the specs of this before receiving the guitar, I was trying to remember how I felt about it in previous years, and I think I always came down to a sort of, like they're good sounding pickups, but they're a little weak in output, especially the neck pickup, which I think is under 6K. I was a little worried that I would have to swap the pickups to actually get sounds that I liked, but you know what? The longer I spend with these bare knuckles, the more I've come to appreciate them. They are really beautifully wound. They are excellent sounding pickups. I've gotten a lot of tones out of this that I really, really love. And at this moment, shockingly, I'm not thinking about swapping anything out on this guitar. I'm definitely going to address this little issue right here, but the pickups are staying. Now, for as good as the pickups sound, I do have one very minor complaint, and it's just for me. These pickups are not hum canceling in the middle position, which for me is a little bit of a problem because I've become so used to having reverse wound, reverse polarity pickups. That's the way they were always intended to be from the factory, although you can certainly find examples that left the factory with the wrong pickups installed and thus are not hum canceling in the middle. That happens from time to time, and maybe that's what happened to one of Johnny's guitars. I really don't know. All I do know is that this set is specifically not hum canceling in the middle. Not a huge issue, not gonna ruin your day, unless you've got some serious noise issues with your rig and you've depended on that middle position being dead quiet, then yeah, you're gonna have an issue here. But I wouldn't say that it's necessarily noisier in the middle positions. It's just not hum canceling, and that's something that I wish I had on this model, but I'm gonna live with it. I would also say the covers are just a little bit too yellow for the rest of the guitar, but you know what? That's an aesthetic complaint. Don't worry about that. Now, before we give our final verdict, we should talk about some issues that this guitar had, and it did have a few out of the box, unfortunately. The most glaring and egregious of them all was, I hate to say it, frets. Still an issue with Fender in 2023, and something I don't like seeing at all. I have gone to the lengths of fixing them for the purposes of this review and my own sanity. You know, making these play demos with an unplayable guitar just wouldn't work, so yeah. It's fixed, mostly. But this guitar, out of the box, had the roughest rosewood fingerboard. This was so bad that when you were bending a string, you could hear the of your finger rubbing against rough-hewn rosewood, and that just was not acceptable for me. So I did go ahead and buff that out when I finally got around to installing my 12 to 54 strings, and I will say the same for the frets, which were also incredibly rough. So I had to buff the frets. But before I did that, I also had to reseat them. A lot of these frets, the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth a little bit, the eighth, the 11th, were all very, very high. And not seated on the board properly. And I know that that happened at the factory and not in shipping or anything because there was finish underneath them. Orangey maple neck finish underneath the fret. So my advice from the 66 reissue Jazzmaster review remains the same. If you're buying a new Fender, definitely make sure that you either play one first so that you can pick it out, you know that it's working, or if you're buying online, just buy from somewhere with a rather generous return policy because, yeah, Fender is still having some fret issues in 2023, and that's not good. Overall, my final thoughts on the Marr Jaguar are extraordinarily positive. I have really come to appreciate the changes that Johnny Marr made to this guitar, and yeah, I've absolutely fallen in love with this thing. You know that thing that people say about guitars where there's always a song. They've got a song in them. You just gotta find it. This thing definitely had songs in it. I received this Johnny Marr Jaguar as I was starting to write parts for my friend Callie Kazoo's next record. I don't know when it's coming out, but it should be soon. And I can't wait for you to hear it because everything I came up with, pretty much all of it, I wrote on this guitar. Even with the stock 10 to 46 string gauges, I was having a blast coming up with new ideas, working with altered tunings, which I almost never do. Everything that I tried started here. And God, if that's not the most ringing endorsement for a guitar, I don't know what is. So what's my final verdict? A big fat yes, absolutely get a Fender Johnny Marr Jaguar if you're in the market for a guitar that's got vibe and class and unique features and a great damn sound. And that's coming from someone who doesn't know how to play any Smiths tunes at all. If you were looking for Smiths style playing in this video, I am lusciously sorry, it just isn't gonna happen. Well, that about wraps it up for me. I do appreciate you spending some time yakking with me about the Fender Johnny Marr Jaguar, a guitar that I have deeply fallen in love with. Really great. Really can't recommend it enough. Shout out to my supporters on Patreon. There are links in the description if you too are interested in seeing how you can support my work here on YouTube. But before I go, let me say I hope you're taking care of yourselves and each other. I hope you're having fun with guitars, and I'll see you in the next video.